Hi everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing the MCC72 underbust corset by Mystic City Corsets. So here's the front, the side, the back, and the other side. For the length and fit of this corset, the center front here is 10.5 inches. At the princess seam here, it is 7 inches, 4 inches from the waist up and 3 inches from the waist down. At the side seam here, it is 8.5 inches, and in the center back, it's 10 inches. For the circumferential measurements, today I'm wearing the size 22 lace closed. So when I measured the waistline, it was 22 inches, true to size. The underbust I measured at 29 inches. This is 1 inch less curvy than they stated on their website. The listing stated that it had an 8-inch rib spring, so this one was 1 inch less than that. However, the hip did measure true. It measured 32 inches, so it is accurate to what the website says. It does have a 10-inch hip spring. For the silhouette of this, the rib cage is relatively conical, and you can see that it's fairly short over the hip here, so I can't really say for sure whether this is like rounded over the hip. It is deliberately designed to cut up and over the iliac crest here. One of the more interesting parts of this pattern is the sweetheart design in the back here. And you'll see in a minute when I go to the tabletop portion of this, that's actually mirrored in the Modesty panel in the back as well. So if you wanted to wear this with a bit of a lacing gap, the Modesty panel comes down like that as well to sort of continue that sweetheart shape and not cut it off in a strange way. So I appreciated that. They put some thought into that. But the sweetheart shape in the back here, it not only looks visually nice, but it also helps to combat the squidge or muffin top that occurs right underneath the shoulder blades. Because like I've said in previous reviews, the back fat doesn't happen like right in the center by the spine, unless you're talking about the Venus fold, but most of that muffin top that occurs, that the flesh that gets trapped underneath your bra band and above the corset happens to be right underneath the shoulder blades at the side back of the body. So the sweetheart helps to lift up and sort of raise the back of the corset right where you need the most support. The princess seam being only 7 inches technically makes this like waspy length. So somebody who has a very short torso of less than 8 inches would be able to still sit down in this corset comfortably, because it's the princess seam that determines whether you're able to sit down in the corset, not necessarily the center front, as long as you're not crossing your legs when you're sitting. However, the center front being 10.5 inches and the center back being 10 inches as well, this is more descriptive of a standard length underbust. So this corset is kind of a mix between the two. The gentle point in the top and bottom edge does not make this corset very ideal for stealthing, because these points might stick out underneath clothing and make it noticeable. However, this would be fine as a statement piece worn over top of your clothing, for instance. Because I have a long torso and a high sternum, this corset is unfortunately not the best fit for me, even though the circumferential measurements seem to make it look fine on my body. But my xiphoid process is right here where the point of this is. So if I just lean forward a little bit, the top edge of this corset wants to sort of dig underneath my xiphoid process, which is not comfortable and a little bit unsettling. So this is not the ideal fit for myself. However, if you do have a shorter torso, then this part will probably rest over top of your sternum, probably a little bit overlapping with the bridge of your bra, and so it will be sitting on the bone and not wanting to sort of tunnel underneath it. So you may not have this same problem. I wanted to review this style because it seems to have a lot of counterfeit and knockoff versions out there on Amazon and Etsy made by knockoff manufacturers and suppliers. So one day I want to be able to get my hands on one of those other knockoff corsets and be able to compare the pattern and the construction and see if they are simply stealing the pictures, which obviously that's still pretty bad. That is DMCA violation. or if they are actually stealing the patterns as well. Because there are companies who simply steal the pictures, but they never manufacture the corset, and then they just sort of eyeball it when somebody orders it. And then there are other manufacturers that actually do steal patterns from other companies and make replicas using the exact same pattern pieces. So it would be interesting to buy a couple of different knockoffs of this and see which different manufacturers are creating different types of counterfeit products out there. So let's go to the tabletop portion of this review, and I can show you the other details of the MCC72 close-up. So here is the MCC72 laid flat, and for the materials, it's pretty straightforward, black cotton twill. And I've tried to pull apart the layers here, and I'm unable to for panels 2, 3, 4, and 5 here. Now for panels 1 and 6, obviously you need to sandwich the busk and the bones in between the layers, so those are a double layer. But these middle panels here, they're impossible to pull apart. So they feel thick enough to be a double layer that might have been fused together. And so they're treating that as one layer because it's definitely thicker than a single layer, and it's less able to warp in that way. So it might be 2 layers fused together. But with the construction, you can see that on the outside there's a little bit of a top stitch there, so that the panels were assembled together, and then the seam allowances were pushed towards the back of the corset. And it seems as though the seam allowances were actually covered on the inside here with this boning channel here. And so these boning channels are made with narrow strips of black cotton twill once again, and you can see that it's single boned on the seams here. This is what the Mystic City label looks like, as well as the size in both inches and in centimeters here. There is no label for the country of manufacture, nor is there a label for the cleaning instructions. Now this corset is not very conducive to turning it on its side because of the Modesty panel in the way here, but this has a 6-panel pattern. 1, 2, 3 make the front, 4, 5, and 6 make the back here. Because I don't count this little strip of extra fabric to reinforce the grommets here, I don't consider that to be an extra panel. And so, as you can very plainly see, most of the curve around the hip is in panels 3 and 4 here, and a lot of the swell in the back to give you some extra room are in panel 4 and 5, and that gives you that sweetheart effect in the back there. And turning to look at the inside here, you can see very plainly the Mystic City Corsets waist tape. So it's exposed on the inside of the corset here, stitched down at all of the panels, at these boning channels, and it's printed with the Mystic City logo. So it's interesting. I'm sure that any of the knockoffs or the counterfeit Mystic City corsets out there will probably not have this style of waist tape. So this is 3/4 of an inch wide, made from grosgrain ribbon, and I can see the outline of it going right to the center front of this corset, all the way to the center back here. Now I noticed that this waist tape is a little bit on the wiggly side, but when I'm wearing it, because I have a long torso, I have a lot of space between my ribs and my hips, I don't feel this. But if you have a shorter torso and a very narrow clearance area between the bottom of your rib cage and where your hip bones start, you might feel this slight asymmetry because I don't see it kind of going up on the other side. But I did receive this corset secondhand, full disclosure, so I am not sure whether this corset was sold as a second, meaning that it was known to have a defect, or whether it really was purchased new and there are slight inconsistencies in the construction. That being said, I know that the MCC72 is no longer on the website, so it could have been that there were enough issues with this particular corset that they might have pulled it from production. But I know that they have started working with a new factory, so I would be interested to know whether or not they will ever bring this style back again. The binding in this corset is made from matching strips of black cotton twill, machine stitched on both the outside and the inside. So on the outside here, you can see it has a small top stitch, as well as on the inside there's a small top stitch as well. So it may have been done in a single pass. Please excuse the lint here. And there are 4 garter tabs in this corset, 2 on each side, made from satin ribbon. The Modesty panel in the back of this corset is about 4 3/4 inches at the narrowest part here, right at the waistline. It's a little bit wider over here, around 5 3/4 inches right there. So even though this Modesty panel is a very elegant shape, I would not necessarily follow this shape of lacing gap. I would not condone a lacing gap that would cause the lacing bones in the back to warp in this direction, because you can end up permanently warping your corset that way. So even though the Modesty panel is a really flattering sort of hourglass shape, I would still try and lace your corset parallel, as long as that is the most comfortable way for you to wear it. Now this Modesty panel is boned, so it has 3 vertical bones and 2 horizontal bones to prevent this from collapsing when you're lacing up, and it is suspended on the laces. So if you want to remove your Modesty panel, if you're not a fan of them, you can easily do that by unlacing the corset and relacing it. You don't have to go out and buy a seam ripper or pull out any seams, because I know that makes a few people nervous, but it does mean that you have to unthread it all the way to get it out of the grommets here in order to remove it. And additionally, there is a Modesty placket in the center front here, a bit under 1/2 inch wide, and finished in black cotton twill, unstiffened and extending out from underneath the knob side of the busk here. The busk in this corset is 9 1/2 inches long, and it is actually slightly wider than your typical standard flexible busk. It is actually 3/4 of an inch wide, actually probably 5/8 when you take away the fabric here, and it is slightly more rigid compared to your standard busk here. So you can see that the front is very difficult to flex, and it has 5 loops and pins, all equidistantly spaced. And I am turning this corset on its side with the inside exposed because it's easier to see the boning channels this way. So there are 16 bones total in this corset. The single boned on the seams here, like I mentioned before, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are all 1/4 inch wide spiral steel bones, so they are flexible. There is a rigid 1/2 inch wide bone in the center front here adjacent to the busk, and there are more flexible 1/2 inch wide flat steel bones in the back by the grommets here. There are a total of 20 grommets in the back of this corset, 10 on each side. They are size 0 with a large flange around them and finished in silver, spaced a little bit closer together at the waistline here, these 4 right at the waistline. And these are the ones that I said, even though they might not look the most dainty or elegant, these are the ones that are probably the strongest and most fail-safe if you want to wear a corset for daily wear or waist training. These ones are almost impossible to pull out. Moving the Modesty panel aside so you can take a look at the inside of the corset here. So you can see nice big washers. These have mostly rolled nicely. Couple of splits here and there, but they don't actually catch on the laces because the laces are pretty hardy and abrasion resistant. And I see no damage to the fabric around these grommets. They're holding in fairly well. And the lacing in the back of this corset is your typical workhorse lacing, black flat nylon shoelace style lacing, a little bit under 1/4 inch in width, a little bit springy, but very difficult to snap or break. And when I widen this as far as it'll go, it allows a lacing gap of about a little over 10 inches. So this would accommodate somebody who is perhaps achieving an 8-inch lacing reduction, or more realistically, probably a 6-inch reduction with a 2-inch wide narrow tidy lacing gap in the back. But also please keep in mind that the Modesty panel in the back will only cover a lacing gap of about 4, maybe 4.5 inches. I started measuring the maximum lacing gap in the back just because so many people had asked about it, like how long are the laces, and I'm not going to unthread every single corset and measure the length of the laces. And it's also completely subjective when you talk about the length of the laces compared to how many grommets are in the back and how long the corset is. So this is probably the most consistent way for me to report on something like this, but do keep in mind that just because a lacing gap is this wide, it does not mean that you should buy a corset with that much waist reduction. The MCC72 corset by Mystic City Corsets was released in black cotton and black mesh. It was $89 US, and of course Mystic City does ship worldwide. And this concludes my review of the MCC72 corset by Mystic City Corsets. So if you enjoyed this video and you learned something new, please remember to click that like button down there, as it helps support the channel and helps the algorithm to do its magic. If you own this corset, let us know what you think of it in a comment down below. And if you have any questions about this, leave your questions down below and I'd be happy to get back to you. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you all next week for another video. Bye.